How's it going? My name is John Benitez. I'm Marin Bike's in-house shop technician, R&D technician, and QC mechanic. And today, I'm gonna be going over how to assemble some bikes with you. Before we get started, let me first say congrats on your new bike. On behalf of Marin Bikes, thanks for choosing us, and we hope that your bike brings you nothing but good times and awesomeness. So depending on where you got your bike from is gonna dictate the size of the box that it comes in. Now every dealer is different, so your bike may arrive in a box about this size. It may also show up in a bike box that looks like this. Either way, the bike is gonna be about 90% assembled, so the 10% of the assembly is gonna be coming from you. So you're gonna need a few things to get started with building your new bike. First and foremost, you're gonna need your bike. Second, you're gonna need a floor pump. Third, you're gonna need a toolkit provided with your bike. And lastly, you're gonna need an open workspace to work in. So once you have the bike removed from the box, there's gonna be two additional boxes that are gonna remain inside. You're gonna pull them both out. And what those are, is it's gonna be a toolkit to assemble your bike and a small parts box as well. So this is gonna include everything you need that goes along with the bike. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna open up the toolkit here. Now inside this box is gonna contain everything you need to assemble the bike here. So it's gonna include a torque wrench, several different bits to assemble the bike, and a pedal wrench as well. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna start by inflating the rear wheel. So we're gonna take our pump here and we're gonna undo the chuck of the head. Now in this case we have a Presta valve, so remember to unthread the top of the head so that air passes through a lot easier. Take your pump, take the head, install it on the valve, and in this case we're threading on the valve. In some cases you may have a different pump that requires you to undo the top portion, but either way get it on there securely and then just start pumping away to get the tire inflated. Now if you're unsure of how much pressure to put in here, there's always going to be an indication on the sidewall of the tire as far as how much pressure you're going to want. And so now we're going to go ahead and inflate the front tire. Undo the head of the Presta valve again. Now in this case, just go ahead and match whatever pressure you put in the rear. So in our case, we're gonna go ahead and inflate this to 28 PSI. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna install the front wheel onto the bike. Now in order to do this, this fork requires a 6mm Allen key to take off the axle on the fork. So we're gonna come over to our toolkit here. You're gonna grab the torque wrench. And then with your bits here, you're gonna find the 6mm Allen bit. Now in this case, it's the biggest one. It'll have a number 6 engraved on it just in case. Go ahead and install that into the tool firmly. Grab your front wheel. And with the rotor side facing you and away from the bike, go ahead and lean it up against the bike here. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna come around to the other side of the bike here. And what you may notice is that there is an orange pad spacer here for the front brake. You're gonna go ahead and remove that. You're not gonna be needing it. Next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna take this block here that's holding up the axle, and we're gonna remove that as well. Notice how I'm holding the upper crown of the fork, just to make life easier for myself. Take your tool, insert it into the axle, and go ahead and start loosening that up. Cool. So once you get to a point where you can undo the axle by hand, go ahead and finish it off by hand and gently remove it out. Go ahead, grab your front wheel while still holding the upper bridge of the fork. And you're basically gonna roll the wheel into place. And we're gonna line up the dropouts of the fork here so that it goes and connects with the hub of the wheel, and it should just slide gently into place and smoothly. And you'll know when you have it in place because it won't go any further. Once you're at that point, go ahead and insert the axle back into the wheel. You might need to take a little bit of weight off the wheel just to get it in smoothly. So before you fully tighten the axle down, go ahead and take a look at the outside here. We're gonna look at these two numbers here. It says 80 inch-pounds or 9 Newton meters. This is the tension setting we need to use with our torque wrench to get it to proper tension. So what we're gonna do is we're basically gonna tighten this down until the outer handle here gets to that number 9. Just go ahead and insert your tool here and just start tightening it. And you'll get to a point where you reach tension. And this is where you want to keep an eye on the tool to ensure you're right at about 9 Newton meters. And I'm gonna say right there is pretty dang good. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're just gonna ensure that the rotor here is centered between the brake caliper on the front. So go ahead and remove your tool, put it in your back pocket. Go ahead and grab the bars in this case on the bike. Lift up so that the tire can easily spin. You're just gonna give it a good spin. And as you cannot hear, there is no rubbing on the rotor. That means that the caliper itself is aligned with the disc rotor. If you find that you're having any kind of rotor rub on the front caliper itself, it's gonna be a matter of loosening up this bolt here and this bolt here, and then realigning the caliper so that the pads are centered over the rotor. If you need help doing that, there's a plethora of videos online that can guide you through that process. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna be aligning the handlebars of the bike and the stem, and that process is gonna require us to get the bars in a position that's comfortable for us so that when we go to ride the bike, it's in a position that we like. We're gonna start with the bars in this case. Now, in order to get the bars in a proper positioning for us, you're gonna need to break loose the stem plate here, and that's gonna require a 4mm Allen key. So let's go over to the toolkit and grab a 4mm. Get your torque wrench, remove the 6, go ahead and put it away, and then find a 4mm, that's this one here. Insert it into the tool nice and firm. Let's come back to our bars, and what we're gonna do is we're just gonna break these loose ever so slightly. They don't need to be very loose in this case, because what will happen is you'll find is if they're too loose, it makes getting the bar in a position that's a little bit more difficult. So you just wanna get it to a point where you can easily move the bar like so. Now, if you look at our bar here on this bike, you're gonna notice that there is a positioning line with 2 trees here. I like to use that as a starting point, and I usually, what I end up doing is lining it up with the open portion of the stem here. So once you get it to that point, take your tool, and you're just gonna slowly and evenly start tightening these down one by one. And what we wanna do is we wanna make it even between the bottom portion of the stem and the top. And once you get to a point where these start snugging up on you, we're gonna start paying attention to the torque wrench here to get these to the proper torque. Now, if you're unsure of what torque setting you're gonna be using, you come over here, you can see that there's a number here that says 6 Newton meters. So we're gonna use the torque wrench to get the stem plate to that. And once you get to the last bolt here, which is just at 6 Newton meters now, you can rest assured that this bar is installed on your bike properly. All right, so now that we have our stem aligned with the front wheel, we're gonna go ahead and tighten down the stem clamp bolts. Now in this case, with our stem here, there's one on the left side and another one on the right side. Now remember, the tension setting for this stem here is 6 Newton meters. So go ahead and grab your torque wrench and start on one side. And what I like to do is get it to a point where it's reaching tension and then move to the next one. You don't need to fully get it tensioned down quite yet, but you just want to get them settled into place. And then just kind of work your way to the next one and tension that down a little bit. And you're gonna get to a point where these are gonna start getting pretty tight. And at that point is when you wanna start looking at your torque wrench here to make sure you're at the right setting. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna install our pedals here. Now, with every pair of pedals, there's gonna be a right and there's gonna be a left. If you look on the outside here, we could see that there's a label here indicating that this is the right. Normally there's one on the left here too. But in case you get a set of pedals that doesn't have these stickers on here, I'm gonna show you a trick that I use to help indicate which is which. If you look at this pedal here, if you come close, you can basically see that there are some ribs right here on the pedal. This is gonna indicate that this is the left pedal. If you take the right pedal, you'll notice that it is smoothed out. This indicates that this is the right. All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna put some grease on the pedals here. We highly recommend installing grease. It just prevents any kind of binding down the road. If you have some grease, great. If not, visit your local bike shop and they will have plenty. So just put a little bit of it on your finger and you're just gonna liberally apply to the threads and just rotate the pedal, ensuring that you evenly coat the threads. All right, that's one. Let's go ahead and move to the next. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna go ahead and install the pedals onto the crank of the bike. In order to do this, you're gonna need your pedal wrench. So go ahead and come over to your Marin toolkit here, and you're gonna pull the Marin pedal wrench here. Grab your left pedal, and we're gonna start there. All right, so now we're gonna go ahead and install this pedal onto this crank arm here. So to do this, you're gonna take your pedal wrench here, you're gonna put it on the flats of the spindle that are on the pedal, just like that. So now, what you wanna do is get the threads positioned onto the crank arm, and you're gonna go ahead and back pedal while keeping pressure, a light pressure onto the crank arm. And what this is doing is it's threading onto the crank arm. Just stop, give it a little pull, and you notice that I can't break it away from the crank arm. That indicates that the threads have engaged on the crank. So now we can go ahead and speed up the process a little bit until this pedal is fully in place. And you'll know when it is because it'll give you a nice hard stop, like right there. So torquing these down, you don't need a whole lot of pressure, but what I like to do in this case is go ahead and just give a little bit of a pressure on the pedal wrench, and that indicates that the pedal is fully threaded onto the crank. So you're gonna go ahead and repeat the process on the other side of the bike with the right pedal. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna set the saddle height. Depending on the bike that you may have a dropper post, you may have a rigid post. In this case, we're working with a dropper. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do is get it to the extended position. So go ahead, and on the left side of the handlebar, you're gonna see your dropper lever here. Go ahead and push that inward and get it raised to the full extended position. So the next thing we're gonna do is we're gonna loosen up the seat post clamp. So go ahead and grab your torque wrench and grab a 4mm Allen key. Now, depending on the model, it may be different. It may be a 5. Just look at the size of it and grab the correct size bit. So these shouldn't be too tight to begin with. So you're just gonna loosen these up to a point where you can rotate the seat post back and forth. That indicates that this is fairly loose. Go ahead and put your tool in your back pocket so that you can easily access it down the road. And now, a good baseline for setting the saddle height is you want to get it in line with your hip. That's usually a good rule of thumb. You may find yourself down the road adjusting it, but for just getting the bike set as it is at this point, that's a good route to go. So be cautious if you have a dropper post. You're not going to want to just solely pull this up. What you want to do is take the dropper post housing and feed it into the frame while simultaneously pulling up on the post. So as I'm feeding this into the down tube, I'm just gently pulling up on the post. And you'll feel it tension up a little bit. And now I'm looking at my hip and seeing if it's in line. And looking at it right now, I'd say this is pretty solid and a good baseline for myself. So the next thing we're gonna wanna do is just ensure that the saddle is in line with the frame of the bike. So looking over it, it's a little crooked, so we're just gonna basically straighten it out so that the front of the saddle is in line with the top tube. Once that's done, we're gonna go ahead and move to tightening down the seat post clamp. So go ahead and grab your torque wrench here. Before you tighten this, if you can see it, it's stamped on here, there's another torque setting. It says 6 Newton meters. So we're gonna go ahead and tighten it to that. So as you can see, this bike is now upside down. And the reason for that is it's gonna allow us to double check the shifting. So what we're gonna do is get down here with the bike, and you're basically gonna start pedaling. And what we're gonna do is, with our right hand, is come over to the shift levers here, and we're just gonna run through the gears and just ensure that the shifting is smooth. We're listening for anything like any audible clicking or any troubles with that chain going up the cassette. And the reason we do this is just to help us indicate if anything needs to be adjusted before we go on the actual test ride. Feeling everything and listening to everything, I'd say that this derailleur is adjusted perfectly. All right, so now that this thing is fully assembled, we're gonna go ahead and take it on a quick test ride just to ensure everything is fitting to our liking, the gears are shifting properly, and just to check the braking. So now that we've gotten back from our test ride and we've determined that the saddle is at the proper height for us, the bars are in the correct positioning and they're nice and comfortable, and the shifting is nice and crisp, this bike is ready to go ride. A couple things to note is after you've spent some time on your bike, you may notice things aren't quite as crisp as they once were when you first initially built the bike. You may notice that the brakes feel a little bit different. You may notice that the shifting isn't quite as crisp. You may notice that the tires may feel a bit softer than when you first built up the bike. If you find that any of the issues that you're noticing are a little bit above your head, it's always wise to visit your local Marin dealer. If you're not sure where one is located, the link below will help you find one. Thanks again for watching the video and for being a Marin rider. We hope to see you out in the trails.